If you're filing a VA claim in 2026, this episode could save you months and potentially lots of money.
Because right now, there's a lot of noise online. And if you follow the wrong advice, you'll waste your time, miss evidence, and leave benefits on the table.
We're seeing the same pattern. Somebody hears one headline, runs with it, then builds their whole claim around it.
And the VA doesn't reward the hype, it rewards documentation that matches the rules. How the evidence is written, what it proves, and how it connects.
So today we're gonna clean it up. What's real, what's misunderstood, and what actually moves a claim forward.
And listen, we're keeping it practical. How to think about back pay, how to avoid paying for the wrong proof, how to use statements the right way, and what to watch as technology starts changing the process.
If you ever thought I'm doing everything and it's still getting denied, this is the episode.
Let's get into it, veterans.
Hello and welcome to the Prepare to Compete podcast, where we talk all things VA benefits, real estate, entrepreneurship, and more. Kenneth Davis, how you feeling today, my brother?
Oh, excited. Listen, ready to really talk about some really heavy stuff here for veterans, but also really exciting stuff, just to really unpack, things going on here.
Absolutely. It's a lot going on. It's a lot going on with us as well, right? You see a brand new set. We're continuing to elevate things for you. Definitely drop down any comments about any topics you want us to cover in the future and how you like the new setup, and also where you're listening from, because it's really key so that we can start talking about topics that impact your state or even your local jurisdictions and cities.
Yeah, true indeed. Listen, you guys, not only do we want to make sure that we are really engaging with you guys, but the biggest thing is this. We're here to share, right? We're here to share information, share all, again, when I talk about all the information, we want to share all the information, but also really help our brothers and sisters in arms. And not only our brothers and sisters in arms, we also got to really take a real underpinning and also tip our hat to the military families as well. Really appreciate you guys. We want to make sure that they have all the information for the support that not only to provide the younger veterans, but the older veterans as well. So continue to share information and also uplift. So please like and subscribe.
Absolutely. So as we get into our first topic, there's been a lot of rumblings, Kenneth, about different initiatives with retro pay. Okay. So when we're talking about retro pay, we're talking about the back pay that the veteran is able to receive once their claim is awarded. And today we just want to kind of talk about that and really kind of unpack some new legislations that are on the table and could have some potential benefits if passed. However, will that actually happen as far as getting back pay back to the effective date? So today we want to separate what's fact versus fiction around retro pay going back to discharge. And Kenneth, I know there's been tons of policies throughout the years, and as a public policy expert yourself, I want you to kind of educate the people on exactly how it works when there's proposed new legislation.
Yes. So listen, veterans, and also veteran supporters, you got to understand, listen, when a bill is passed, it is just not frankly just through the House, the Senate, it just magically appears, and next thing you know, we're running full steam ahead. Right, there's we have to actually come to a consensus in multiple parties. Not only come into a consensus through multiple parties and being signed by the president, we also got to understand implementation as well. So I always want to preface any bills that are coming down a pipeline. Let's understand this stuff is not happening tomorrow, right? So I want to make sure that all veterans know that when things are introduced, it is a process, all right? So we always wonder, well, why does it take so long for the government to do X, Y, and Z? We all know about the red tape, but let's understand that for a bill to actually go through the process to be signed by the president and enacted, and actually implement it, and where you're receiving it, it could take years, decades, even centuries. We got to understand that, okay? So with that being said, you guys, I want to make sure that with the new information that is about to come out, let's really understand and unpack it and really kind of really focus on the timelines, but not only the timelines, how it affects you and your family in the future.
Absolutely. So now, Kenneth, when we're talking about retro pay, going back to discharge, what is being proposed and how will it actually change and impact the veteran community?
All right, veterans. So this bill here is Senate Bill 1665, the Oath Act of 2025, which was introduced by Richard Blumenthal, a senator here from Connecticut. So understanding the Oath Act is about accountability. I want everybody to understand that first, because, and we're going to go ahead and kind of really unpack what the Oath Act is. However, this actual bill was introduced by the senator due to the fact that many military members was sworn to secrecy, okay? But now being sworn to secrecy, we understand that there are so many different missions that is imposed and required for military members to not actually talk about until files have actually been released and unsealed. So with many veterans and military members under this sworn secrecy, we understand that a lot of veterans are not receiving the disability benefits from the time that they have transitioned outside of service. So if at any point in time that a veteran was sworn to secrecy or a military member at that time was sworn to secrecy, they are then transitioning out of service and cannot talk about that actual mission or any type of act that actually transpired during that time frame. So therefore, veterans aren't being able to receive their benefits.
No, absolutely. Now, that's a phenomenal lens on really just how to look at that. Now, when you talk about veterans who completed all the special missions and a number of years of not receiving those benefits, who would you say, if this Oath Act is actually passed, who would it actually benefit the most?
Great question. Great question. So the Oath Act is pretty much going to benefit many veterans, right? However, specifically classified chemical testing programs between the time frame of 1948 to 1975, right? There was a group of veterans, again, service members, who pretty much was sworn to secrecy about the chemical transactions that happened there. Okay, and we can actually get into some of the, more detailed information about it. However, the country pretty much, had a secret chemical warfare testing program that many service members participated in during that time frame, right? And like I said before, we can kind of unpack it in regards to the details, but we're focused on the bill, right? So they were actually sworn to secrecy during that time frame, and when they were sworn to secrecy during that time frame, at that point, they didn't have the just due to rightfully receive benefits when transitioning out of service, and already during that time frame, it was very taboo to even talk about benefits at that time. So, if retroactively veterans can be able to receive benefits from the discharge of service or during that time frame, what could that really look like? And that's what the bill is actually really forwarding. So that is a very, very huge point when we unpack that, because now, does this open up the door for other veterans who were on classified missions to unpack some benefits that they may deserve?
No, absolutely. Because when you really get into it, Kenneth, there's a ton of things that happen. These bills don't come out of anywhere, right? They don't come out of nowhere. They are really setting a precedent of what's next in VA benefits, and there's reasoning behind it, because with those different chemical reactions and exposed to burn pits and a myriad of things that veterans have been exposed to, there has been lawsuits. Yeah. And there has been a particular lawsuit in relation to the retro pay. And there's one that this bill actually is kind of following based on the Taylor case. So definitely wanted you to talk to us a little bit more about that particular case and what happened there and how it really connects to the whole issue of should benefits be backdated to the discharge date.
Yes. So we got to understand the legislation. So it's a legislation that's codified by Taylor versus Madonna. Okay. So what this is actually doing, it is trying to correct a mishap or an injustice, some would say. And this injustice is basically stating that the injustice is going to be based upon veterans not receiving benefits during that transactional time of sworn to secrecy. Understanding that, now the Oath Act is going to provide the veterans, if again passed, is going to go ahead and provide those veterans to restore their benefits from the date that secrecy has been was released as unclassified. So once that has been lifted, at that point, that's when veterans will actually be able to be restored full retroactive benefits back to that date, right? And that is a huge, huge win for veterans if it does go through. However, we're stating that in this bill here that we're talking about the Edgewood Arsenal Act, okay? I mean, the veterans in the Edgewood Arsenal. So, and they're only talk about the Special Chemical Warfare Program. Now, I believe this bill is going to open up the door for a ton of other secret missions that was classified at the time that is no longer, right? And we have so many veterans that tell us, it gives us so many different aspects of their mission that they were actually involved in, which I am grateful for to hear that story. However, it has been unclassified, but no one has come to the table to talk about it. So I am honored to hear their stories, and I'm honored to be able to see this. But we also got to be understanding that this is going to open up the door for many veterans about sworn secret missions that should not be exposed during the time of the mission, but also how many veterans are actually talking about these things now. So that poses the question for me, just again, if I'm looking at this bill and policy, when do we stop? Because we're going to have some unintended consequences amongst this. Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about here next, right? When we're talking about going back to discharge with retro pay, that can get very, very expensive. Even just for that group there, we're talking about veterans receiving millions of dollars in back pay per veteran just for those groups. So when you're opening it up to veterans outside of those secret missions as well, what does that timeline reality really look like? And what should we be watching out for as the developments continue amongst this conversation?
Well, when we talk about timeline, you guys, again, the bill could go up and go down, go up and go down. A bill could really take many, many years to actually really be passed because it must be a consensus before, going up. And we can get into the details, but we're just focusing on what the bill and trying to understand what they're trying to do here, okay? So with that being said, it could take years, but we're talking about veterans from 1948 to 1975. How many veterans are going to be still in existence to be able to receive the benefits that they actually deserve? Please, I mean,
yeah. I mean, and when you get into that, you're talking about different things with the DIC program, right? Because if those veterans should have been 100% permanent in total and they were not, does that retroactive pay go to their dependents? And again, it opens up a whole lot of things when we're talking about implementation and the rules that happen when we kind of go downstream of this legislation. So I know a lot of times the headlines can be very polarizing when we talk about this. And we understand that, yeah, veterans, if you have a service-connected disability, reasonably so, it should go back to the discharge date, but it just opens up so many different nuances of payment and where is this money actually going to come from with the taxpayer dollars and so many other details there where it's so unfortunate sometimes that the government just cannot make it happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we really got to understand that. I know a lot of bills are in good faith, right? Some of the bills are in good faith, but also some of the bills could be a political chess move, right? Because truth be told, we know some of these bills aren't going to get passed. But does it look good to be able to pass a bill or to forward a bill that is leaning toward constituents who are going to vote for you?
Absolutely, Kenneth. You say it very well there. So now, when we're talking about the next action steps, okay, and we're talking about what documentation viewers should gather, what should they really look to do next when they're trying to maximize their benefits and really maximize the opportunity to actually receive their benefits to the retro date, right? And now we're talking about, of course, these group of veterans here, but let's talk about active duty service members even transitioning currently to be able to make sure, hey, they're in a period right now where they could make sure they have their documentation, they could make sure they're gathering everything. So once they're discharged, they're fairly compensated.
That is a great question. So the first thing I would say is tune in to Prepare to Compete, because tuning in to Prepare to Compete is always going to give you the most updated information and the most information that's going to be able to service you and your family to be able to make sure you maximize all your benefits. That's the first thing. Secondly, I would stay abreast with the changes of VA benefits. Okay, this is one bill that's being pushed out, right, in relation to retroactive benefits. But I would tell you, there are thousands of regulation changes that happen internally regularly all the time. Okay, and that's the truth. Okay, again, okay, I can be embellishing a bit when we say thousands, but I can tell you right now, there's hundreds. I am 100% sure, and why I say that, because I actually worked for the federal government for many years. And I've seen these changes over and over again. However, not only staying abreast with that information, but making sure that you are prepared to discharge when it's time for you to discharge, and you're staying abreast with timelines that is outlined for you as a veteran. What does that mean? Let's focus on when our intent to file date is. Let's focus on when did we receive our notification letters for decision letter dates. What is a decision letter date? The date that you actually receive your notification letter. Now, you can be able to focus on continuous prosecution to make sure that your effective date is actually established from your first initial intent to file, because you can, again, get denied. But don't stop. We have to keep going, but properly.
Absolutely, Kenneth. That's great information there. Big payouts only happen if the evidence holds up. Let's talk about the evidence tools people misunderstand the most. All right, Kenneth. So when we get down into evidence, right, it's so very, very important. And now part of medical evidence, you have a Nexus letter. And now there's a ton of misnomers, of course, about Nexus letters, and I know you're going to go into it today. And the first question I have for you here, Kenneth, today is, when is a Nexus letter actually worth it?
Well, that is a good question. And it could be circumstantial. This is why we understand that every veteran's military disability claim is different. Every veteran's VA disability claim is different. Why? Because their military service is different. So it would behoove you to, one, make sure it is reviewed by an expert who can be able to further assist you. However, when we're talking about a nexus letter, that is a piece of medical evidence. If you have been watching Prepare to Compete, you know here that we understand that all nexus letters aren't necessarily going to be something that is going to be considered for your claim. It depends on what type of claim. And what I mean by considered, I don't mean they're not going to take it into consideration, but it is possibly not needed. You don't need a nexus letter for presumptive disabilities. If we understand that we don't need a nexus letter for presumptive disabilities, then why is it forwarded? Well, it is circumstantial. You can reach out to us and we can go ahead and give you some of those details as well. All right. So when we talk about a nexus letter, it is only worth it when it is needed.
Absolutely.
When do we think it's needed? It is circumstantial, you guys. Please, if we can, please reach out. We'll be able to, again, really evaluate if it is worth it for you.
Absolutely, because you say it's circumstantial, Kenneth, and it definitely is going to matter on what's included, right? So when we're talking about what's included, we're talking about review of your actual records, right? Sometimes you have a nexus letter and it's generic. It can be generic in nature, right? If it has the proper rationale and standards, and I'm no expert in all of those things there, but Kenneth, as a former VA rater, can you let us know exactly what those things are as far as records review, rationale, and standards as it relates to the nexus letter so veterans could win their VA claim?
Of course, and I'm going to keep it simple. I'm not going to go into regulatory information. I'm not going to go into the M21, the Warms Manual, 38 CFR. No, I'm going to focus on this. One, when we talk about a nexus letter, is your physician qualified to be able to make a medical opinion amongst the issues that you're dealing with? If you have if you are trying to be service connected for TBI, now you have actually developed migraines in accordance to your TBI. Well, is your dentist qualified to be able to make that justification or rationale to be able to get a positive medical opinion amongst your TBI that's related to your migraines?
Probably not.
Well, let's keep it simple. So understanding, let's go ahead and make sure that our physicians are qualified. Let's also making sure that they're labeling their NPI. And that's their National Provider Identification Number. So we got to understand their NPI should be located somewhere in the nexus letter. That's going to also certify a medical opinion can be justified. Titling, phone number, address, where again they are practicing medicine at. Not only that, let's also consider how your nexus letter is developed and written. It is very important that we have a regulatory standard, that your nexus letter is written in a space of regulatory standards. We can go ahead and unpack what are the regulatory standards. And again, we're going to unpack them in many episodes. But if you join our community, you can get it immediately. But now I want to go ahead and tell you, if it is then in regulatory standards, how are you claiming the actual disability that you're trying to get service connected? It should state that in your nexus letter and also provide rationale also with a medical statement that is justified by the Department of Veterans Affairs, typically as least as likely as not, which is a positive opinion, which then will actually certify and certify that Nexus letter as it should be a very clean Nexus letter.
Well, Ken, if you're giving them a host of information there, we definitely appreciate that. So imagine you receiving that information here today. But of course, if you're within our for veterans community, wealth of information there. And of course, if you decide to work with Veterans for Veterans Consulting, we'll be able to walk you through step by step of that process. So now when we're talking about the Nexus letter, we also want to know, sometimes they look at the Nexus letter and it just gets ignored, right? Because it may not have those things. So what you kind of gave us a lot of information about what needs to be included, the rationale, even those standards. So can we talk a little bit more about the red flags that get VA Nexus letters ignored when they send a Nexus letter and it's not quite up to the test and it doesn't really pass that mustard? You know, it doesn't cut the mustard. It's like they can look at this and it's like, oh no, it just gets ignored. So what are some of those red flags there?
Well, I'll give you one basic one that actually is going to throw a red flag immediately. Did the physician review your medical records to be able to provide that rationale? What does your medical records look like? What does your medical records file look like? Did they review your service medical records? Did they review your private medical records? Did they review your VA medical records? Did they review the unclassified records that you were sworn to secrecy back in 1975 to be able to develop a perfect rationale on why you should be given benefits? That is one of the biggest red flag that we can identify. We can unpack others, but that right there is probably one of the most triggered reasons why denials happen, and now probative weight would have to be given to the CMP examiner that does your exam.
Absolutely. And sometimes when veterans are getting Nexus letters, it's unfortunately sometimes from scuttlebutt talk, right?
Yeah.
They just heard of a provider from another veteran and they use that person, or they read somewhere in a blog or some Facebook or Reddit forum about Nexus letters and saw somebody selling letters online and went and purchased that service that unfortunately sometimes aren't up to the standards that the VA would like. So when a veteran is pursuing a Nexus letter, how do they actually choose the right provider to be able to request a Nexus letter correctly?
Well, that's very important. Choosing the right provider for your medical opinion is very important. They should be trusted. They should be military centric, veteran centric. They should have a wealth of information in regards to the Warren's Manual 38 CFR. Not only that, they should know basic information about you. Right? Let's consider choosing your primary care physician. How we choose our primary care physician should be the same standards on how you choose a physician to be able to write up your medical evidence.
No, absolutely, Kenneth. That is very, very valuable there. So now when we're talking about Nexus letters that help veterans win their VA claim, what is just one main takeaway that veterans can take away from what we talked about today? If they forget everything else, what is one thing that we want them to remember regarding Nexus letters that can assist them with winning their VA claim?
We'll take this. Make sure you're choosing the right service or provider to be able to develop a Nexus letter for you. Reason being, that can make a difference for you actually receiving benefits and being service connected for you and your family, or it can make a difference of years of continuous denials. Sometimes, again, that's just the way a cookie crumbles when you are being denied. But as a veteran, we know that you're resilient. We know that you're resilient. You're going to make proper decisions. So take this time to really take a step back and make sure you're making the right choice. There's no reason for desperation. If you need assistance, we can be able to help you choose the right provider if need be. And also, we can make sure that, again, you are actually directed in the right areas.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, phenomenal information, Kenneth. Thank you. So, a Nexus letter is a medical opinion. Now, let's talk about non-medical opinions that make or break a VA claim. All right, Kenneth. So now I want to talk about buddy statements. Okay, so I hear a lot about this. Veterans always asking, do I need to submit a buddy statement? I have someone that I served with. They're able to write a letter to attest to this event or that event. So veterans have a lot of questions regarding a buddy statement. So what exactly can a buddy statement help to prove for the veteran for the purposes of their VA claim?
Well, typically, again, when we talk about buddy statements and lay statements, they come very often. And when you talk about development of lay statements and buddy statements, we have to understand that there must be some considerations and tack and standards that most adjudicators are going to look at, right? Now, only thing that pretty much is going to kind of really unpack it if you were in that location, right? They're not going to be able to assistively let you know that you have a diagnosis, right? But they can actually say if you were dealing with stomach pain that led into IBS, their after service. Now we have some type of correlation to confer that the IBS is related because we have a witness. Buddy statements are great. We like buddy statements, but buddy statements at the regional office level typically is not going to typically make the decision for you.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to hold too much weight on that, okay, veterans? However, they are helpful for your actual file.
Absolutely. And there are also, sometimes reasons why a buddy statement may just not work for you. Yeah. So now when we're talking about that, who exactly is your buddy, right? That question definitely comes up a lot in really deciding who should write a buddy statement for you. So what we want you to inform the community of today, Kenneth, is what are some of the best sources and resources for writing a buddy statement?
That is a great question. And a lot of times, you should always want to refer someone who is present in that time frame. There's many veterans, as a military member, you have brothers and sisters in arms that you still speak with today, right? Being connected is one of the most easiest things that we can do these days, right? Through social media. So reaching out to a brother or sister in arms who was in that company, division, or brigade, because again, they can really place you in that location. They can actually discuss the symptoms that you dealt with. They can also formalize if and reason with you, or no, I'm sorry, not reason with you, but reason within the statement and provide rationale on your mental stability at the time. If you were dealing with financial issues, which could cause, obviously, stress. If you were dealing with digestive issues, if you were, consuming unhealthy foods that led to diabetes. There are many ways to be able to go ahead and link those issues. So I would always advise a buddy statement, but I would not lean on it. So the best personnel to be able to provide you with a buddy statement would be the people that you serve with. Typically, one's close to you, because they're going to be able to really discuss some of the issues that was transpiring that you probably was not speaking the most, because I'm sure you were not talking to your upper leadership about a stomach pain. I'm sure you didn't go to medical about it. I'm sure that the foot pain that the boots cause you did not actually come up during that ruck march, right? So with that being said, we got to consider who are writing these buddy statements.
Absolutely. Who is writing the buddy statements, what they're writing, and just even the format, right? Because what you're talking about there gets me thinking about, well, maybe you may need multiple buddy statements. Maybe there are certain conditions that one person could attest to versus another person, right? So, certain things that may have happened on a flight deck, if someone works in a different department, they weren't privy to some of the different injuries and incidents that occurred, but they may have been with you in the chow hall, so they might be able to talk about other things, right? So really kind of considering all of those different factors. So now when someone is developing a buddy statement for someone, what are they needing to look at as far as just the formatting of what to write and what really works in convincing the VA when having those lay statements?
Listen, veterans. I want to cut straight to the point. Listen, please do not send in a 6-page letter to the VA. It's something that's probably not going to be the best conduciveness in regards to your claim in relation to a buddy statement. So let's be very concise, to the point. X, Y, and Z happen, straight to the point. Now, once you are actually having that 1 or 2 paragraphs of what actually transpired, you want to make sure whoever is writing the statement for you, spouse, friend, family, whoever, please make sure that they are they're providing their full name, email, phone number, address, and also if they were in service, I would go ahead and provide their ranking at the time and also location of their actual duty station. That would help a lot. It helps. Those small things really, really provide some assistance.
Absolutely. So, Kenneth, you talked about the different things that could essentially help in terms of a buddy statement. Now, what are some of the things that may weaken a buddy statement? You talked about, of course, being 6 pages. You definitely don't want to do that. You don't want to just have something generic or copied and paste from AI, artificial intelligence, right? So what are some of the common mistakes you see veterans making when submitting that buddy statement because it just did not have the right set of information?
Simple. No name.
Oh, wow.
Who are writing the buddy? It's been multiple times. Again, I am X spouse of X person. Well, who are you? Placing a name, phone number, email is very helpful. Okay, not saying that they're going to reach out to you, but they probably want to know who you are, right? And also, again, certifying it with the signature, right? So doing things of that nature. It helps very much so. It does not need to be, your buddy statement does not need to be certified mail, so it doesn't need a notary. No, it needs to be notarized. So we don't need any, it's not going to be needing any of that. It's very simple. Again, a letter that is drawn out from start to finish. We have, again, introduction, a body, and also a conclusion of what transpired. And I think that's very simple and straight to the point.
All right, definitely. So you definitely want to be simple and straight to the point. So now when you're talking about a template here, you are already really gave a great standard format. So when we're talking about writing a buddy statement, if you could just in the next 60 seconds, for example, kind of just name the key elements that must be included on a buddy statement.
Yeah, so again, it's listen, we're veterans, right? So we got to understand that that we don't want to overthink this, or we don't want to nuke it, right? As they would say in the Navy for most of it. But we want to make sure, which again, nukes, I love you guys. Don't you ever think again, engineering department, you guys make the ship run, okay? However, let's keep it simple. Name, relationship of the actual service member or veteran who is again claiming benefits. We also want to actually put there again, if you serve together, if you served in different location and companies, what is the relationship and how often did you guys see each other, right? What are some of the symptoms that you actually seen transpire that the veteran was dealing with? And also, if the veteran was on deployment or where you guys were located, that is a big thing, right? Because again, something happening on deployment is much different when you're in the States. For reasons, we can go ahead and go on and on why that is important, but we're not, okay? You can go ahead and refer to some of the old videos. Again, we'll go ahead and make sure that we go ahead and discuss that in a later date. And actually, and once that is transpired, having a conclusion, signature, date, email, phone number, and also your service information, right? Again, who are you? What is your relationship? Let's provide your MOS, location, duty station, and that will be very simple as that.
Absolutely, Kenneth. Thank you for that wonderful information. And we talked about a lot today, okay? We talked about so many different facets of changing legislation. We talked about Nexus Letters. We talked about buddy statements, and zooming all the way out. The way notes get created is changing, and the way they get reviewed is changing as well. So we want to make sure that we discuss how artificial intelligence is actually changing the VA claim process. As we said, AI is changing the VA claim process. And what we really want to know here is exactly how is that showing up for veterans, and what do they need to know as these changes continue to be implemented?
Wow, this is actually a great question. I think it's actually a really, really good topic to really kind of speak about. I think AI is not only changing the VA claims process, but it's changing everything. All right, let's take that into consideration. It's changing everything. However, it is a supportive tool. There are, misinformation that is produced on a regular basis, but now understanding that there are certifications that is needed, and being able to understand just a human will be reviewing this information, okay? Just like when you go get a mortgage, there is a secondary underwriter. So this is to be said very similar, all right? So understanding that, we want to take in consideration the information that is being provided. That adjudicator behind the screen knows if it is AI generated. And so does it sway the decision? It may or may not. However, we also have to consider the raters or adjudicators' personal feelings at that time of that actual that claim itself. But if the evidence is just the evidence and that evidentiary information is just fact, you really got to understand their personal feelings can't get into the claim. It must be set aside. So if you are having AI assist you, don't let the AI develop your claim. Let AI teach you the information so you can develop your claim with assistance. It's very important. And why it is important? Because it is more than just a buddy statement. It is more than just a Nexus letter. It is the security of you and your family. So taking this time to take the corrective steps to do it the right way is very important. As much as we love this new technology, let's take a step back to understand there are human adjudicators that are certifying these claims, and there has been a ton of claims denied with AI. And I can guarantee you that.
Absolutely. And now we were talking about where it's showing up as far as artificial intelligence. Now, is the VA at all utilizing artificial intelligence within the decision making and records evaluation process to help improve any efficiencies?
Well, I do know that there are talks about it. However, we talk about implementation, right? So implementation is a very unique thing. We're talking about a huge federal agency. Understanding a huge federal agency will be moving towards this undertaking to implement AI, which this is going to get, again, this technology is going to get implemented everywhere. So brace yourself and get ready for it. However, when AI is going to be implemented in the federal government, there is still going to be human elements that are opposed in this hugely. Reason being is checks and balances, just like any type of bureaucratic government that is in existence, which that's what we live in. So you really need to understand that though it is being applied, not right now, there's just talks about it, but there's even talks into implementing AI and robotics into the VA hospital. And you guys can tell me how you feel about that. There are some pushback, but there is also a lot of support. So when I tell you regulations change, bills are passed without you, and it is continuously in forward movement. So AI implementation within the claims process is coming. We just don't know what, when, and how. So there isn't anything just as of yet, because we know we're dealing with our government and also the federal government, our federal Department of Veterans Affairs agency, which some things are taking a little bit longer than not. But brace yourself.
Absolutely. So kind of sticking with that concept and topic, right, of the VA actually implementing artificial intelligence within their process, what are going to be some potential upsides to them doing that? You know, we've exhaustively at times talked about the process and just how long it takes with the backlog of claims and different scenarios where there's not enough CMP examiners and all of those different facets that just bog down the process. So if the VA does start to implement AI, how can this actually help the veterans?
Well, I think it can help the veterans tremendously. There's multiple systems that the VA uses, one interconnecting a majority of those systems together, and also interconnection of agencies, right? There are systems with regards to interconnecting agencies. However, AI is going to make that tremendously faster. And also evidence evaluation. Evidence evaluation to include also making decisions on, you can easily make decisions on presumptive conditions fairly quickly at this point. But there also is going to be human elements that are going to align with that. But the question poses now those evidence evaluators, because we can talk about many positions within the VA or VBA rather. What happens to those people, right? Because now if evidence are being reviewed and being certified with half of the staff that you once actually was working with, now what does the federal government do with those people there? That is a good question, right? I would think so, because it is just not going to be able to just fire. That's not what the federal government does, right? With civil service. being under civil service and understanding that it's gonna take a really big team to figure out how to implement. Policy implementation takes time, and sometimes I'll be very honest with you guys. Implementing policies sometimes never happen after a bill is passed. Take that and understand that. So there's been repeals of many bills, and also regulatory policies. So I don't necessarily know how it's going to affect the actual claims process, but I can tell you one thing: they're going to make it much faster. It just depends on where it is being implemented.
No, absolutely, because there's so many different ways it can be implemented, right? And just in terms of even when you're uploading records to a VA claim and making sure the records go in the right place, right? Sometimes veterans may misclassify the document that they uploaded. So when we're talking about certain triage elements of just really being able to make sure, hey, you said you had an old 781 form, but it was really something else. If the artificial intelligence could catch those things before it reaches the VA rater's desk, it could really help in terms of once the rater gets the claim, they can get quicker to that decision. So with those upsides, as you say, there are some different trade-offs in terms of loss of positions, unfortunately. But, as Americans, right, we learn and grow. And you mentioned a lot of new positions of policy implementation and other roles on how to effectively monitor the AI and different things of that nature that could be potentially needed within those particular upsides of actually implementing artificial intelligence to the claim process.
Yeah, no, I agree. Listen, it's so many upsides, but taking into consideration, there are, there are going to be consequences that we cannot foresee.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are definitely going to be consequences, and there's so many different risks, right? Yeah. There's going to be risks in just certain errors. The human eye isn't perfect, nor is the artificial eye perfect as well, right? And just even some biases, right? When you talk about a computer doing something, I know within the real estate industry, that's why you have certain underwriting standards where you would allow certain artificial intelligence and kind of automatic processing of some things. But when you create a certain formula on how things are approved and denied, it can give trade-offs to particular details and situations that hadn't been considered, right? And really kind of missing that nuance and over reliance of utilizing that system. And when you over rely on utilizing a system, the system starts to get a mind of its own, right? And creates its own type of bias, leaning on the initial instructions over time. So the longer we utilize technology, we have to understand that it's going to take human intervention to come in and test the models and make sure that it's not doing things in such a formulaic way that's negatively impacting, especially veterans with the claim process.
Yeah, no, true indeed, and that's one of the reasons I think we have a lot of these bills, right, or laws that's in place, right? Discriminatory laws. Again, when we talk about the Civil Rights Act, there's so many discriminatory laws that were passed during that time frame under the Civil Rights Act. We got to really take in consideration of that. Now, can we say the AI isn't receiving any hallucinations that is being implemented to create bias, right? Because when we talk about the military and active duty and VA benefits, we are a melting pot of people, okay? We have, again, everyone, all right? Every race, creed, religion, everyone has a place in the military. So now that is going to take considerations because now there's so many things to consider while making these decisions. And though that making these decisions was a very focal human element that they were able to train the brain and also adjudicator on to what to identify, but now the AI could, or artificial intelligence could be identifying other things that could cause a denial, right? Because there is a human opinion that is interjected, and that opinion is very valuable. Reason being is that there could be a positive and negative decision in place, and human intervention will need to be had to be able to lean towards the decision that is more positive for the veteran. So, and that's just, and we're not only talking about the medical, we're not only talking about the medical evidence, right? There's so many different elements of opinionated consideration, because you need to be able to emotionally understand what the veteran was at that time frame. You have to consider what type of branch of service, right? Just because you were labeled a yeoman in the Navy, go Navy. Just because you're labeled a yeoman in the Navy and that's your MOS doesn't mean that you were not exposed to hazardous noise on an everyday basis. Because you were stationed in an aircraft carrier and you were a yeoman in the air department right up under the flight deck, now you're continuously exposed to hazardous noise on a regular basis. So there's a human elements that's going to be tied to all of this stuff.
Absolutely. So when we're talking about VA benefits, what we definitely understand is that the times are changing, right? The processes are changing as well, but deserving veterans of their VA benefits is going to continue to remain. And so we want to make sure that veterans, regardless of the process, know exactly what they should do when filing for their claims. So when we're talking about that, whether it's going to be a manual VA rater, whether it's going to be some robot looking at their claims in the future, what are some of the things that veterans need to make sure that they're doing when they're submitting their claim?
Well, when we talk about, how to, I guess distinctly say, receive the current outputs that you deserve for your benefits, whether if it is a human or AI. Well, let's go down a checklist, right? Understandably basic, information that we always want to make sure that we provide you guys. Again, I'm always going to be a proponent of making sure you have your service medical records, your medical records, your medical records, your medical records. Understand your evidence is going to be needed to be able to make sure that your claim is being able to be positively adjudicated. Okay, making sure again intent to file is a place. Also making sure again that your all your medical evidence is received, statements are placed in place, and making sure that these things are had prior to submission. As long as you kind of outline the formulated details for the most part from the information that we will provide you, again, you have put your best foot forward. So now at this point in time, that's when you're going to have the best chances of getting a positive output. Okay. Again, and let's go over it once again. Intent to file. You want to make sure you got your service medical records. You want to make sure that you have any type of private medical records. You want to have any statements that's attached. You want to make sure that that you have a collective of information that is going to have a AI or the actual adjudicator themselves take a secondary look to make them consider it could have possibly transpired during service, and if not, at this point in time, how could we get a service connected any other way, presumptive, secondary, or aggravation wise?
Absolutely. Phenomenal information, Kenneth. Phenomenal information. And, as we know, veterans are going to continue to use artificial intelligence, and there's a number of ways that veterans are using systems like ChatGPT to really pursue packaging their evidence, and there's a lot of checks and balances there. You know, one of the things you talked about earlier was just making sure your information stays private, right? Because I know one of the things that if you're dropping your service records and your DD-214s and all of these, you're dropping your DD-214s and all this sensitive information into those different artificial systems, you're at risk of your actual privacy. So you definitely want to understand that. So obviously AI can really help you produce your evidence and kind of maximize the efficiencies of writing a buddy statement or drafting a PTSD stressor, but they must be sensitive of the AI outputs from just a security standpoint, but also with the artificial intelligence being generic in their responses. And so really kind of wanted you to talk a bit more about that security component and how veterans should really kind of think about that. And just also just the overall outputs of the information that it will output. And unfortunately, sometimes the VA rater is going to know what you inputted there is AI because it's in a certain format, because the computer just speaks a certain way if it's not trained and prompted properly. And we'll have later videos, veterans, that train you on how to use artificial intelligence and to get past some of those prompting barriers.
Yeah. And also we'll have, again, other resources that can be able to help you, again, if you have AI trying to assist you as well. So that is something, again, that should be coming your way. But when we talk about this type of stuff here, we want to make sure that sensitive and privacy is very, very important. Sensitive information and privacy is very, very important. Okay, sensitivity and privacy of your information is very important. I don't want to stop repeating that. Reason being, if you aren't willing to share your birthday, social security number to a stranger on the street, you may want to take a step back and understand what you are doing when you're putting your information in the AI systems. That's their information. Your information may not be used for certain different aspects. However, we must take in consideration it is a learning model, right? This is stuff. This information is it's cool, right? To really, it's cool to be able to kind of play with or get certain jokes out of it, or go on certain trends and different things of that nature. Now, I pose to ask you, would you want to place your most private and sensitive information in something that you can be able to make a cartoon in as well? There is a lot amount of seriousness around this. So now we have to understand breaches of sensitive information, because once your information is breached, you don't necessarily know where it goes. So I always want to make sure you consider taking consideration of possibly redacting information that is being input. Also making sure that you're consuming a lot of the information to your related service that will be able to make sure that you get the output that you're looking for. But I'll tell you right now, please be careful what you say, be careful of how you prompt it, and be careful of your information. However, what I would tell you is, again, that we will definitely be able to be here to assist you through that process.
All right, Kenneth, that was some wonderful information. We really kind of laid out a lot of key factors that is ultimately going to help veterans moving forward with their VA claims process. So, as always, drop any questions, comments, concerns that you have regarding the VA process down in the chat. Join our community. We're always here to help. And now if you want us to be able to take a deep dive in other topics and subjects, definitely let us know what you want to hear next. And as always, prepare to compete. We're out. Peace.